Today we're diving into one author's really urgent warning. He claims there's a battle going on right now for the very soul of a faith. He argues that two completely different belief systems are trying to occupy the same space. One, he says, is genuine Christianity, and the other is a political movement just dressed up in religious language. And for him, the stakes could not be higher.
So right off the bat, the author draws a line in the sand. On one side, you have what he calls genuine Christianity, and he defines it by actions, simple things like feeding the hungry and loving your neighbor. But on the other side is what he labels false Christianity. He says this version is all about being power-hungry, is racist, xenophobic, and crucially, follows a man instead of Christ. This clash is pretty much the foundation for his entire argument.
So you might be asking, how does he even start to build a case like this? Well, he begins by taking a close look at the symbols of established religion, starting with one of the most powerful objects in all of Christendom.
He zeroes in on a papal title that he says is found on the Pope's scepter, Vicarius Filii Dei. Now, that translates to substitute for the Son of God. The author argues that just having a title like that is a huge problem on its own, but he believes it also holds a hidden, almost coded message.
This is where it gets a little wild. The author takes that title and breaks it down using Roman numerals. He points out that if you take only the letters in Vicarius Filii Dei that double as Roman numerals and add up their values, you get a very, very specific number.
666. For the author, this is no coincidence. He presents this number as a direct symbolic link between a powerful religious office and a pretty infamous figure from biblical prophecy. He argues this is the key that unlocks a much bigger story.
And that discovery, he claims, is what leads to his whole prophetic framework. He starts to argue that three huge books of the Bible aren't telling separate stories at all. No, he sees them as one continuous, interconnected prophecy that's been unfolding for centuries.
The key texts in his analysis are Daniel, Ezekiel, and Revelation. He treats them as if they're all part of the same cosmic conversation, with each one just giving us a different piece of the same puzzle about end times events.
And from these ancient texts, he pulls out three central figures that keep showing up. A beast that rises from the sea, a dragon who gives the beast its power, and this really cryptic reference to a mortal wound that was healed. The author claims these aren't just old symbols, they're characters in a modern political drama playing out right now.
And this is the moment where the author's whole analysis pivots, taking us from ancient symbols straight to today's headlines. He applies this prophetic framework to specific modern political figures, and his identifications are, well, they're pretty startling.
So, according to the author's interpretation, the beast from the sea, which prophecy says rises from a land unknown to the ancient world, is Donald Trump. The dragon, the power broker behind the beast, he identifies that figure as Vladimir Putin. And the saints who are conquered, he argues it's the evangelical church, which he says was captured not by force, but by its own allegiance.
To support this claim, the author points to the prophetic description of a figure who exalts himself above every god, and he offers this direct quote from Donald Trump as his evidence. Why do I have to ask for forgiveness if I'm not making mistakes? The author presents this not as a political gaffe, but as a literal fulfillment of prophecy.
Okay, so what about that mortal wound? The author breaks it down. The wound itself, he says, was being impeached twice and then voted out of office. I mean, that's pretty much a political death sentence. Historically, a career is over at that point. But then, the healing. He pinpoints one specific moment, Kevin McCarthy's visit to Mar-a-Lago. He claims that single act is what miraculously resurrected a political career that should have been completely over.
The author then shifts from politics to economics. He connects a prophecy in Ezekiel 38 about a war fought for plunder to his analysis of Trump's foreign policy. He argues that the intense focus on extracting wealth from places like Venezuela for its oil or Ukraine and Greenland for their rare earth minerals, this isn't just geopolitics. He says it's the seizing of great spoil that was foretold thousands of years ago.
So after laying out all this evidence, the numbers, the prophecies, the politics, the author, Darrell Waters, he turns and speaks directly to the reader. You've heard my witness. Now hear my warning. This is his big pivot from just analyzing things to direct and urgent call to action.
So what is this final warning all about? The author is very clear. He doesn't frame it as just a political opinion. For him, this is a prophetic alarm, a final plea that he says is rooted directly in his interpretation of the Scriptures. And this is the Bible passage he uses to make his final point. Quoting from the book of Revelation, he issues this call to come out of her, my people. He's arguing that her is the corrupted political and religious system he just spent all this time describing. He's saying that true believers have to separate themselves from it if they want to avoid divine judgment.
When you really boil it all down, the author is painting a picture of a massive battle for the soul of a faith. His entire analysis really forces a fundamental question, one that resonates way beyond his specific claims. Where exactly is the line between religious devotion and political power?